Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. So, I would love to see where you're joining us from today or again, yeah, tonight. So, just if you're here with us, do type in the comments where you're joining us from, and we'll be happy to greet you. Okay, so just a very quick backgrounder. Um, I'd like you. I'd like you to. I'm very excited about today because I have a very special guest for this evening. This is my very first LinkedIn Live for the year 2023. Okay, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alexandra Ganzon. I am a communication coach. And for tonight, I've invited a friend. Her name is Yanni. And we met each other at a recent networking event. Okay. This was back in November 2023. And in Bologna, here in Italy. Okay. The event was by Women Per Impact. It was a summit, it was a huge summit. And I attended, I participated in Yanni's workshop. So that's how everything started. I reached out to her. I sent her a message. We grabbed coffee. We hit it off, and we've been in touch since then. So I'm very excited to bring her on stage, and she'll talk to us about a little bit about her personal journey, her professional journey, and tonight we'll be talking a lot about communication and presentation design. So, without further ado, I would like to bring in Yanni.
Hi, Alex,
Okay.
everyone.
Hi. How are you?
Pretty well, thank you.
I'm so happy you could join me tonight. Again, I was just saying this is my very first live for the year 2023. Okay. I made
Yay!
it. We made it. It's like the last day of January, and I told myself I want to start doing lives by January. So we did it. Thank
It
you.
happened. It happened. Here we are.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I was just saying that we met at a recent networking event, and for those of you, because some people are a little bit skeptic about networking events, but really, I mean, I personally find it very, very helpful. It's a great way to meet new people, make new friends, and of course, establish new relationships. So that's how you and I met, and let's talk a little bit about your personal journey. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into design, and maybe also the time that you realized you wanted to be a designer.
Awesome. So, I think regarding the design, always at the back of my head, I knew that I wanted to do something creative, perhaps merchant design, maybe it was art, but I knew I wanted to go graduate. But at the times when I was thinking that, to be honest, design was not a profession that you want to choose for good life necessarily. So I took a little bit of a different route for a while.
Okay.
At 18 years old, I moved to Ireland, washed dishes, served beer, made bagels,
Okay.
and after a while, I actually got back to that idea that right, perhaps design can create the life that we wanted,
Okay.
and then it all started. You
So it was a
getting the
leap of faith.
bagels,
I
starting the
mean,
college.
yes. Amazing. I mean, you've always probably had it in your heart. You didn't really know how to get there. You tried several other options, but in the end, you were meant to be a designer.
I think so.
Yes. Okay. A creative soul through and through, shall we say? Yes.
I like that description.
Yes. Okay. So, throughout your journey, throughout your career, your business, Tell us a little bit about some of the struggles that you've encountered, as a creative, maybe even telling people what you do or explaining to businesses what you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Absolutely.
think at the beginning of the journey, we all entering something new, entering the workforce, we all have very similar challenges. So, what it is, we need to learn how to actually work within a team, build relationships with that, actually to understand what it means to be working and producing monetary value within a company. Then, of course, there was a language barrier. I think I still have it sometimes. It's fun, quirky accents. We love it now. Um, in terms of being a designer, I think companies do really like to work with designers. They like having a design department, and the skill itself is really valued. To tell someone that you're a designer is also really cool. However, like I see a lot of times that designers are put towards the end of the chain as a glorified producers instead of being brought in as a creative thinkers, as a strategic thinkers. And I think most of designers, I think the gift that we have with that creativity is that we are really brilliant critical thinkers and can bring in the value earlier in the process instead of just making something look beautiful.
Great. You mentioned something really interesting there, about designers being brought towards the last phase of the project, right? And therefore, to me, it almost sounds like you're brought just to execute the final output. Basically, the decisions have already been made, all the significant decisions have already been made, and you're just there to execute whatever's been decided. And that's why, it feels like you're right. I mean, it feels like you're just there to do something that's already been decided for you.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
all
And all
designers want
designers
to be
want to be
creative.
creative.
They want to
They
be
want to
making
be
stuff,
making stuff,
not only
Yes.
making
not
stuff
only making
beautiful.
stuff beautiful.
Right, exactly. And I mean, also because you mentioned designers are, very critical thinkers. So that means you're really thinking end to end. You're thinking, okay, this is the situation or this is the problem. How do I address that? You're not thinking, how do I make things look pretty, which is probably one of the biggest misconceptions out there about what design is all about. Would you agree
Yeah,
with that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And you
And
know
you
why
know
it's,
why
it's huge
huge
industry is really
industry is
broad. There are
really
so
broad. There
many
are so
different
many
fields in
different fields
design,
of design,
from
from
fashion to
fashion to
interiors,
interiors,
cosmetic design to
design to
brands.
brands.
And
And
that's no wonder
that's
why
no
it's so
wonder why it's
difficult
so
to
difficult
define
to
the
define
role
the
of
role
the
of
designer.
the designer.
Okay. I can tell you a little bit about my experience in fashion in as far as design is concerned. Okay. So I used to work for a creative studio where we had designers, and then we were like, two of us were doing product development and quality control. And again, this goes back to what we were saying earlier about how, unfortunately, in some fields, designers are treated as mainly executioners instead of, the authors of their own ideas, because that's exactly what was happening. I mean, they had very little room for actual expression of their creative ideas. In the end, they were supposed to interpret, the general idea of the creative director, and then to be able to, interpret what they had done on paper. That's where we would come in and tell, the commercial office or the other, like the suppliers, this is actually what they mean. So, the designers were very isolated in that sense, because it was a message that said, okay, this, you are just part of this part of the process, but you're not part of, the entire process, so you just concentrate on that.
Absolutely. I see
Absolutely. I
that
see that
about my career
about
as
my
well.
career as well.
There's
There's
one interesting
one
moment that I
interesting moment
remember
that I
from
remember
our
from our
conversation
conversation
is
Mm-hmm.
that you were
is
saying
that
as
you were
well that
saying as well that
designers did
designers did
communicate their
communicate
ideas
their ideas
in a different
in a
way.
different way.
Yes.
And a couple
And
of
a
days
couple of
ago,
days ago,
I come
I
across
come
this
across
really
this
interesting
really
quote
interesting
from
quote
Paula
from
Scher.
Paula
She's a
Scher.
partner in
She's a partner in
Pantiground, also
Pantiground,
a legendary
also a legendary
designer.
designer.
And what she
And
said
what
about
she said about
designers
designers
communicating
communicating
towards outer
towards outer
business,
business,
Mm-hmm.
that
the
designers aren't
designers
normal
aren't
people
normal
because
people
they care about
because they care
stupid
about
things like
stupid things like things.
Oh,
and real people
And real
don't
people
live in a
don't live
world
in
of
a world of
Helvetica.
Helvetica.
okay.
It
Wow.
really
It
stayed
really
with me
stayed with me.
because it's so
So
it
it
defines the
defines
whole
the whole
communication problem.
communication problem.
Right. Exactly. So, yes, unfortunately, there is still that stigma, and which is why I'm happy because now there's a lot of talk about, design thinking and how this should really be something that we should all be concerned about. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Oh my God, you
Oh my
just
God,
touched
you just
something really
touched
happy
something really
moment for
happy
me.
moment for me.
So I was really
So I was
lucky
really lucky
before starting my
before
own
starting my
business
own
at New
business
Avenue
at
to
New
work
Avenue
for one
to
of the
work for one
Silicon
of the
Valley
Silicon
companies
Valley
called
companies
Intuit.
called Intuit.
And their
And
whole
their
business
whole business
is built
is
on this
built
idea
on this
of
idea
putting
of
customers
customers
first on
first, on
design
design
thinking
thinking
principles that
principles
you
that
need
you
to
need to
listen to
listen to
understand
understand
what your key
what your
audience
key
is
audience
saying,
is
what
saying, what
problems they're
problems they're
facing,
facing,
and then they
and then they
execute after.
execute after.
So that was
So that was a
fantastic school
fantastic
for me
school for
of
me
design
of design
thinking and what
thinking
to
and
use and
what
how
to
to
use and how
apply it
to apply
in
it
business
in
setting.
business setting.
Okay, wonderful. Because sometimes when we explain it to people, if it's just a concept and we're not able to demonstrate it, then some are not able to grasp the idea right away. But if you put it in those terms, then it becomes very clear, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Yanni, tell us a little bit about what your studio does, and what gap in the market you found. Why did you decide to go into this, and what are some of the services that you offer?
That's great.
That's
So
great.
New
So
Avenue
New Avenue
is a presentation and
presentation
graphic
and
design
graphic design
studio.
studio.
I did
I
scrap
did
a lot of
scrap a lot
other
of other
services that I was
services that I was
offering at the
offering
very
at the very
beginning of the
beginning of the
year.
year.
And the idea
And the
of
idea
that was
of
to
that was to
simplify,
simplify, make
make
it
the focus, really help
really
people
help
to
people
focus on
to
one
focus
thing,
on
which is
one thing, which
presentation
is
design.
presentation design.
And the reason
And the
why
reason why
we live
we
in a
live in
polluted
a
world,
polluted world,
a world
a world
polluted by
polluted by
boring, ugly,
boring, ugly,
formless noise
noise
presentations.
presentations.
Right? It's just a
Right? It's
simple.
just a simple.
I know how
I know how
important
important,
it is, especially for
especially for
B2B
B2B
businesses,
businesses,
this communication, our,
communication,
our
our
heart piece
heart
is almost
piece
like
is almost like
the all
the
the
all
conversations
the conversations
happen over
happen over
presentations, over
presentations, over
pitches,
pitches.
but I'll
But
also
I'll
ask you a
also
question.
ask you
How
a
many
question.
times
How many
you
times
saw
you
your
saw
part
your part
on the
on the
screen and
screen and
your eyes just
your eyes
glazed?
just glazed?
Yeah.
So this is
Makes
why
yeah.
This
this
is
is my
why this
key
is my
idea.
key idea.
This is what, yeah, this is what basically this encapsulates everything. And I absolutely love your tagline, ideas need to be seen. I think that's a
Thank
very
you.
I think that's a great way of putting it. I mean, I don't think it could be any clearer than that, because you're right. At the end of the day, that's what designers do, is we all have different ways of interpreting things. I mean, it might sound like we all mean the same thing. It's a bit like, and this again reminds me of something in fashion. When we refer to colors, uh, we can't just say, okay, I mean light blue, because that can mean a myriad of shades. And that's why you have companies like Pantone establishing exactly what that shade is. because people have very different interpretations of what might seem the same thing, right?
Absolutely. I think
Absolutely.
being
I think being
specific in the field of
in the field of
fashion,
fashion,
design,
design,
any visual
any visual
communications
communications
is really
is really
important.
important.
Okay, wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about communication and design. Okay, so we're moving into the second part here. So tell me a little bit about how communication skills help in your industry, in the design and presentation and design industry. Why is this important?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
We build
We build
business around
business around
communication, right?
communication, right?
Nothing exists in
Nothing exists
isolation.
in isolation.
But I think
But I
one
think
really
one
interesting
really
part that I
interesting
want
part that I
to
want
draw
to
attention to
draw
is that
attention to
we
is that
often
we
talk
often
about
talk about
communication,
communication,
projecting
projecting
ideas, right?
ideas, right?
Projecting what
Projecting what
we want to
we
say
want to say
instead of that
instead
being
of that
two-way
being
street,
two-way
right?
street, right?
Instead of
Instead of
listening. I think
listening.
that's
I
one
think
of the
that's
key
one of the key
skills
skills
of
of
communication.
communication.
Absolutely. That's such a great point, Yanni. I mean, it's so true. The first thing that comes to our mind when we say communicate is us doing the talking, but just as important, or I might even dare say maybe sometimes more importantly, that means listening and active listening. Now everyone's really talking about it, and what you can derive out of that discipline of actively listening. And you're right, so in this case, and again, this all ties into what we were saying earlier, people have different interpretations, so somebody has got to put all those together and show that, present that in a visual way.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Right.
think
Absolutely. I think
one really
one really
fundamental aspect
fundamental
of
aspect
visual
of
discipline
visual discipline
is I see, I
I
want,
see, I want,
and that's the
and
whole
that's the
idea
whole
of
idea
reducing
of
skin.
reducing
If
skin. If
it's way easier to
it's way
communicate
easier
if
to
something
communicate with
has
something
been
that has been
visualized
visualized
instead of
instead
just trying to
of
walk you
just
through
trying
it.
to walk you through it.
Absolutely. And, I think I consider myself as a very visual learner, for example. If you gave me a choice between having to read through something and just seeing an illustration, a visual representation, I would definitely go for the visual representation. And I don't know if it's just me, but I have the impression that we live in a very visual world these days. I mean, it's a little, actually, it's too much, right? I feel like we're bombarded with images on a daily basis. But again, I think that might be that, that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good challenge for a designer like yourself, right? Like how do you make the distinction? Like how do you choose, and what how would you decide what works for one client over another?
That's a fantastic
That's a
question.
fantastic
And I
question.
think we
And I
bring
think we
back
bring
to
back
the listening
to the
skill,
listening
right?
skill, right?
Every client is
Every
different,
client
every
is
client is
different, every client is
individual. They
individual. They
facing different
facing
challenges.
different challenges.
They have different
Yes.
They have
audiences, they
different
have different
audiences, they have different
customers.
customers.
Yes, yes. So you really, really have to be there, be very present, listen, and actually understand and interpret. Okay, what does this particular client need, and what's the best way to do that? Yes?
Absolutely. It's really
Absolutely.
this
It's
broad
really this
approach,
approach.
right? There are
Yes.
Right.
some,
There are
like we
some,
were
like we
discussing,
discussing,
templates, how
templates,
to tell a
how to tell a
story, or
story,
how
or
to
how
create a
to
brand.
create a brand.
Really,
Really,
that
that
depends
depends
on who you're
on
working
who you're
with.
working with.
Right.
It's a
Yanni,
craft.
It's a craft.
it's a craft. No, absolutely, it's a craft. I mean, it's an art to its in itself, right? I'm curious. Have you ever encountered clients who don't even know what they want themselves? Because I mean, that's another thing, right? I mean, it's one thing to work with people who have a fairly good idea of what they want, and yet we have those who are not even sure of what they want.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
That happens all the
absolutely. That
time.
happens all the time.
Okay.
And that's
And that's
actually the
actually
best
the
way
best
to
way
work,
to
because
work,
my
because
role as a
my role as
designer
a
is to help
designer is to help
clients
clients
you educate what is going on
what is going
in the
on
street,
in the street.
what are the best
What are the best
practices, how to
practices?
help
How to
them
help them sort of
drop those
drop those
ideas
ideas
Right.
because they know their
because they know
business,
their
right? And that's
business,
their
Right.
and
job,
that's their job.
their business.
Okay.
Business.
Yes. Okay. Have you ever like what kind of struggles have you had with clients? Have you had objections on like I don't know your final proposal or something which a client didn't particularly agree with or talk to us about that.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
of
And I
course. And
think
I think
this
this
any industry,
industry,
regardless whether it's
regardless whether it's
design
design
or
or
CGS, need to be
CGS, need to be
changed and
changed and
refined
refined
together.
together.
And the
And
best way
the best way
to go
to
around the
go around the
objections,
objections,
understand where they're coming
understand
from,
where they're coming
find
from.
that
Mhm.
question,
Of course,
it
Of
can be
course.
very different
very different
reasons.
reasons.
Sometimes design is also very
very
subjective.
subjective.
Okay. Yes.
So
So
I think
basically
the-
understanding their context, yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But the
The biggest
challenge, I think,
challenge,
to
I think,
go
to go
and understand the
and
subjective
understand
feedback.
subjective feedback.
Because I like,
Because
I don't like,
I don't
that's
like
okay,
that's
Yes.
okay, great, but like, does it
but
work?
like,
Does it hit your goals?
hit the goals?
Is it delivering of what you
Delivering of
ask?
what you ask at the first place?
Right. Yes. And I mean, yeah, I can imagine that that might be the first layer of objection, right? Because it's always the visual impact is always going to be eventually about do I like it or do I not like it? But then the challenge there is for them to understand, okay, what is it about what they're looking at that they're not liking or why they don't think it's going to work. So that really encourages a lot of very honest communication and very open communication at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Also, that
Also, that
of whether it
whether it
works,
works,
if it doesn't
if
work.
it works.
Because there's also
Because there's also
context
context
to the industry.
in
For example,
example,
if you are
if
working
you
for the
are working for the
financial,
financial,
you might not
you
go
might
with
not go with
hard
hard
background
background
that is Olympic.
that is Olympic.
You might, it might be your key
It might be your
differentiator.
key
You know, this is
differentiator. This is up for
discussion.
discussion.
Of course, absolutely. Okay, let's talk a little bit about stereotypes. You touched a little bit about this earlier about how designers are not, good communicators. Is there any other like major misconception about the design industry or designers that you think urgently needs to be addressed?
I think these are the
I think
key
these
ones.
are the key ones.
Okay.
Designers
Being the executors,
executors,
and designers not
designers
being
not being
communicators.
communicators.
Yes.
With which
With
I
which
partially
I
agree.
partially agree.
Because
Because designers,
by
by
education,
education,
were taught, placed in the
placed in the
industry
industry.
as individual
Individual
creators, right?
creators,
Our
right?
ideas is
Our
our
ideas is
treasure.
our treasure.
No one
Yes.
can
No one
take
can
it.
take
No
it.
one can
No one can
copy it. Like
copy it.
make
Like
arguments.
arguments.
Of course.
But in
But
reality,
in reality,
ideas happen.
ideas happen.
It's organic. They
It's
just
organic.
float
You
around.
just
You
float
grab it.
around. You grab it.
All
You
of that.
all of that. Mhm.
And the business
And
acumen
the
as
business
well,
acumen
right?
as well, right?
To be
There
able
you
to
go.
talk about
Talk about
design, to
to
understand the
understand the
context,
context,
understand what is going, why it's
why
happening,
it's
why
happening,
it's
why
getting
getting
from other
from
things.
others.
I think this
I
is
think
one
this
of the
is one of
biggest
the
skills
biggest
that
skills that
designers can
designers can
teach themselves
themselves
Yes.
to go
to
further.
go further fast.
Absolutely. And again, this is interesting because I see this happening. I see this true in fashion as well. When we look at even big fashion houses, okay, there's this perpetual debate on whether a creative director can also be someone who has that commercial vision. It's very difficult. They say it's very difficult to have both traits in one person. So you usually have a creative director who takes care of design, and another person, probably the CEO, who takes care of the business side. And sometimes that partnership works, a lot of times it doesn't. And so it's fashion always has to make a decision, okay, who are we letting go? And unfortunately, and we've seen this very recently, it's the creative director who ends up leaving. So I think that demonstrates your what you were saying earlier, that unfortunately designers are seen as that, like, okay, that you're going to execute these ideas, and if you're not happy with it, or if you don't think it's because this is what sells today, if you're not happy with it, then you have the option to consider other options.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
That's just
That's just
a
a
really good
really good
point,
point
because it also
because it also
brings us thought
brings
about
us
what is
what
valued
is
in these
valued in these
GMOs. Whether it's a
GMOs. Whether it's a
creativity, whether it's
creativity, whether it's
originality of the
originality of
ideas,
the ideas,
craftsmanship,
craftsmanship,
Mm-hmm.
or
or
making money,
making money,
monetary
monetary
investment
investment
in the
in the
company. And of
company.
course,
And of course,
there needs to
there
be
needs to be
balance.
balance.
It's a
Absolutely.
difficult
It's a
approach.
difficult approach.
Yes, yes. I think that's always one of the biggest challenges in any business that involves any amount of creativity, right? Okay, now let's move on and talk about some of the presentation design do's and don'ts. And this is my favorite part because I feel like I'm gonna be guilty of something here. Okay, so I'm sure all of us at some point, okay, because even my students, I ask my students in fashion marketing to come up with a presentation at some point. And, I realize a lot of them are very comfortable with the tools out there, but being comfortable with the design tool doesn't necessarily mean being good at it or being able to deliver an effective presentation design. And I can say that for myself as well. Okay, so what do you think? I mean, throughout your career, in your business, what are the most common design mistakes that we tend to commit?
Oh, where do I
Where
start?
do I
This is the
start?
second
This is
topic.
the second
Oh
topic.
gosh, okay.
No,
No,
I have
I have
sat in a
sat
lot of
in a lot of
meetings with a
meetings
lot
with
of
a lot of
presentations,
presentations,
Okay.
and I want to draw
and I
your
want to draw
attention
your
to
attention
one
to one
point here.
point
The
there.
presentation
The
is not a
presentation is
report
not a
that
report
you
that
read
you read
in
in
isolation.
isolation.
It's a performance,
The
right? You're
performance, right? You're
delivering
delivering
performance to the
performance
audience,
to the
whether it's your
audience,
Yes.
clients, whether it's
whether
your
it's your
teammates,
teammates,
the
the
CEO, right?
CEO, right?
Yes.
And
And,
that aspect
that
is
aspect
really
is
often
really often
forgotten.
forgotten.
Presentations are really
Presentations are
boring
really
or
boring
blunt
and
from the
blunt
visual
from the visual
standpoint, and
standpoint,
also
and
from
also
the
from
storytelling
the
standpoint
storytelling
too.
standpoint too.
Okay.
A lot of people
A
read
lot
the
of people read
slides,
the slides,
and why
and
should be
why
sitting
should be
somewhere
sitting
an
somewhere
hour if
an
you can
hour
just
if you
read
can
through
just
them in
read through
five
them in
minutes?
5 minutes?
All right,
Right.
that's
Right?
one.
That's one.
Boring
Yes.
Boring
presentations.
presentation.
Okay. Reading off slides. So yes, that's a no-no.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another aspect
Another
that is
aspect that
really
is
spun
really
down.
spun
Presentations
down.
are ugly,
Presentations are
right?
ugly, right?
So
So
something that you
something
just
that you just
brought up
brought up
is that it's not the
is not the
tool, it's
tool,
how
it's how
mastering the tool
mastering
is
the
how you're
tool is
telling
how
the
you telling the
story.
story.
Yes.
There's a lot
There's a
of
lot
text
of
in
text
website
in
things,
things.
Right.
and I'll tell you one
And I'll
thing
tell you
about
one
it.
thing about it.
If your audience is
If your
reading what is
audience is
behind
reading what
you,
is behind
they're not
you,
looking at you.
not looking at you.
Right. Do you think some people use that maybe as some people are not comfortable speaking in front. So I don't know. I feel like they're either, well, some people need all that text because they're afraid they're not going to remember what they're supposed to say. But sometimes maybe that distraction element is something that, I don't know. Do people do that deliberately or they just don't know?
Perhaps
Perhaps
some people
some
probably
people
do that
probably do that
deliberately, and
deliberately, and
especially if you've
especially if
been
you've been
volunteered
volunteered
by volunteer
to
Yes.
yourself.
volunteer yourself or something.
Right. Yes, that does make sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the
Right.
third
So
one,
no
The third
reading.
one.
Yes.
oh,
Okay.
Oh.
the third mistake.
Third
Are you ready?
mistake. Are you
Oh
ready?
dear. Yes, I'm ready.
How about those
How about those
400
400
slides?
slides?
Right. Yes, we still see a lot of those, right? We still see a lot of presentations with way too many slides. And again, I don't know, it's just my opinion. I feel like that's what we do when we're just so scared of forgetting something uh, from the content that we're supposed to deliver. So, the tendency is just put everything up there and just let me go through everything to make sure I covered everything. But again, you know, that's not the way to do it, right? Because I mean, at a certain point, you just lose your audience attention.
You really
You
do.
really do.
One good question to
One good
ask
question to
in the
ask.
presentation.
The
What's the
presentation.
purpose?
What's the
Why are we
purpose?
doing this
Why are we doing
presentation?
this
Why is
presentation?
it being
Why is it
presented
being
in front of the
presented
audience?
on the audience?
What we're
Right.
trying to
What
do
we're trying to do,
Yes.
and what the audience
and
wants
what
to
the
hear from you.
audience wants to hear from you.
Because a lot of
Because a
times,
lot of
if, for
times,
example,
if, for
I'm
example,
sitting
I'm
in a
sitting in a
pitch,
pitch,
your audience
your
might
audience
not
might
want to
not
hear a
want to
lot
hear
about
a lot
you.
about
They
you.
want to hear
They want
about
to hear
your
about your
solution for them.
solution for them.
So
Okay.
going to
So
that
going
point
to that point
fast and
fast
then
and then
building your
building
reasoning
your
behind it.
reasoning behind it.
Okay.
Make them
Absolutely.
excited,
Make them
right?
excited, right?
Yes, no, of course. But you know what? I feel like, and this is something I've seen, because you're right, the approach should be who is my audience and why is what I'm going to present to them important to them? Why is it relevant to them? That should be one of the first questions that we ask ourselves. But I feel like a lot of people, especially those who are so used to delivering presentations that end up just recycling presentations, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you kind of need to tailor the presentation depending on who you're talking to. So people tend to do that, recycle existing presentations without considering the different audience that they're addressing, and they just go through it like boom 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 and that's it.
And I see a
And I
lot
see a
of
lot
people
of
doing
people
that.
doing that.
There's a lot
There's
of
a lot of
reasons behind
reasons
it.
behind
It's
it.
time
It's
to
time
make
to
sure
make
that
sure
okay,
that
we need to
okay,
deliver
we need
this
to deliver
content,
the
but
content,
the
but
design is again
design is again
secondary
secondary
later.
later.
I've
Right.
seen a
I've
lot of
seen a lot of
executives,
executives,
CEOs doing that very
CEOs doing that
mistake,
very mistake,
working
Yes.
really
working
hard
really
for
hard
days,
for days,
getting the
getting
content
the content
features right,
features right,
but then
but
design
then
is,
design
well,
is,
design is
well, design is
like
like
right? Because it
Yes.
shouldn't
it
be
shouldn't
their
be
job
their
to be
job to
great
be great
running the
at running
company
the
with
company
fantastic
Yes.
with
design.
fantastic design.
Absolutely. And you know what? You just reminded me of this data. I was telling you that I'm a big fan of Nancy Duarte and her agency, and I've read some of the books, and it's interesting how they talk about this survey that they ran for high impact presentations, and where they asked C-level executives if they understood the importance of these presentations, and they do. The most of them, like 80% of them, spend a lot of time. But when they went and asked how much time they dedicated to each phase of the presentation, it's always the part where they prepare the slides gets the least attention. And that, I think that's exactly what you were referring to. They just don't see the value of it just yet.
I see your
I
point,
see
and
a
I have a
point and how
fantastic quote
fantastic
for you
quote
as
for
well
you
by
as
Dr.
well by
John
Dr. John
Magdalena.
Magdalena.
He said
He
that if
said that if
companies would
companies
have
would
as
have
little
as little
respect
respect
for
for
business
business
as they have
as
for
they have for
presentations, the
presentations,
majority
the
would go
majority would go
bankrupt.
bankrupt.
Oh wow. That's wow. That's a powerful one. That is a powerful one. Yeah.
It needs a
It
lot to
needs a
sink
lot to
in,
sink
but
in,
it's
but
true.
it's true.
Yes. Yes. So true. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, I feel like the challenge here is again for people to start understanding the importance, the value of what effective presentation design can do for the companies, rather than just see that as something extra or something we'll take care of it when we still have extra time. And again, there are professionals like yourself who do this. It's not something that they have to, we don't expect them to churn out fabulous presentations on their own.
Exactly. Everyone
Exactly.
has their own
Everyone
role.
has their own role.
And there's something that
And
you
there's
mentioned
something
just
that you
minutes
mentioned
ago,
just
that
minutes ago,
we're
that
so
we're
used
so
to this
used to
old
this
process of
old process of
working.
working.
It's really
It's really
difficult to change
difficult
that,
to change
right?
that, right?
If it's not
If
broken,
it's
then
not
fix
broken, then
it,
fix it,
all those
all
knowledge.
those knowledge.
And what is really
And what is
interesting
really
about the
interesting
art
about the art is
school of thought
school of thought
is that they
is
focus
that they
on
focus on
storytelling, bringing the
storytelling,
heart
bringing
of
the
the
heart
audience
of the
on a
audience
journey.
on a journey.
Yes.
It's about the
It's
beauty of the
about the
slides,
beauty of the slides,
keeping
information
to the
to the
minimum,
minimum,
actually
actually
creating that
creating that
information that,
information
okay,
that,
we're going to
okay,
tell
we're
the
going to tell the
situation, we're going
situation, we're going
to
to
bring the
bring the
challenges, we're going to
challenges, we're
paint
going to
this
paint this
ideal life,
ideal life,
whatever.
whatever.
Right.
It's really interesting.
It's really
building
interesting. It's building
a hero story,
hero
right?
story,
Life
right?
was like this,
Life was
something
like this,
happened,
something
the
happened,
hero was on a
Yes.
journey,
on a journey,
through the
the
dragon,
dragon,
Yes.
after.
after.
Yes.
It's familiar
Familiar
story,
story,
and it helps you to
helps you to
visualize, it
visualize,
helps
helps
flow the
flow
ideas
the
that you want to
ideas that you want to communicate.
Right. No, that's so true. Because this whole that's the storyline, right? And even as one thinks about it, or even if you read about it, it's like, yeah, it sounds simple enough, but again, seeing it actually executed is a completely different ball game. Because again, when we talk about, for example, presenting a lot of historical data, or when you have figures upon figures and relationships, and you're gonna have to demonstrate all, you can't have too much stuff up there, because the minute people see it, I personally, I get turned off, and I just look away, and I'm like, okay, I'll just wait for the next slide and hopefully understand what that means, when that's
What's
exactly
the
what
action
slides.
you want from your audience?
Your
Like, I just
audience.
want to
Like, I
hide
just
from
want to
what you
hide
showed
from
me
what you showed me
and
Exactly.
and
ignore it
ignore it
completely
completely
until the next
until the
slide.
next slide.
Right. Exactly. Oh boy. Yeah, but that's so true. I mean, I feel like, especially now, again, that we're in such a visual, we live in very visual times, right? I feel like now more than ever, we really should understand, we should be able to distinguish what effective presentation or what good design is versus what's just confused and cluttered.
And I think we know
And I
that.
think we know that.
We know what
We
good
know
design
what good
looks like.
design looks like.
If you think about
If
it
you
as
think
well,
about
like
it as well, like that visual
presentation of any
presentation of
Mhm.
any
product,
product,
packaging,
packaging,
it's
it's
PowerPoint deck.
PowerPoint deck.
When it's good,
When it's
it
good,
directly
it directly
communicates the value.
value,
The value, the
the value, the
quality,
quality,
and when it's bad,
and when it's
also
bad,
directly
also
communicates
directly
the quality of the
communicates the
product
quality of
or
the
service
product
that you're
or
talking
Right.
service
about.
that you're talking about.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So we know
So we
how it
know
looks
how it
like.
looks like.
We don't always
Don't
know
always
how to
know how
execute
to
it.
execute
How
it.
to execute it, exactly. It's like you recognize it when you see it, but honestly, if you don't have the talent, or that's not your area of expertise, you can't do it. It's that simple, right? So on that note, why don't you tell us maybe some of your top tips for people who need to do a presentation at some point? Like, what are the things that we need to remember?
All right. The simple
The simple
three.
three.
Okay.
Don't read out the
Don't
slides.
read out the slides.
Okay.
Also, don't put
Also,
a lot of
don't put a lot of
content.
content on.
Okay.
This leads me to the second
This leads me
point.
to the second point, right?
Simplicity is the
Simplicity
key.
is the
If
key.
you want to
If you want to
communicate one message,
one slide.
because we as humans, we process information slowly. We want to focus on one point being said to us at any time given. So less is more. Also ask, can it be 5 slides instead of 4 to 5 slides? Simplify to the core. Make it fun, make it fast. And the third one is the visual hierarchy. that is based on the key
on the key
principles of visual
principles of visual
design.
design.
It's the size,
It's the
it's the
size,
color,
it's the
it's the
color,
contrast.
contrast.
So simplify
So
that.
simplify that.
Bigger things,
Bigger
we
things,
see them
we
first.
see them first.
Bright colors, we see
Bright
them
colors, we see
first.
them first.
Something that
Something
needs
that
to
needs to
be
be
understood is going to be highlighted by contrast.
Right. Wonderful. So basically, really, when you get to think about it, it's less is more. I think that's the best thing that's the best way to summarize everything. And again, you're right. There should be but again, this is something probably that's not very obvious for non-designers. It's like really if you just by tweaking the font of one particular word or emphasizing that or again highlighting the contrast, then it makes it stand out and it tells your audience this is what's important. But I feel like just because of everything, like all the features that we have now in our different within our different tools, we get carried away and we start using all sorts of fancy animation effects. And in the end, that just again goes against the whole idea of less is more, right? So it just gets too much.
It really does.
It really does. Yes.
I think
I
love the
point
about it.
We
We expect that the tools is going to make it work
make
for
it
us.
work for us.
In reality, they won't.
they won't.
So one
So
simple
one
trick that
simple trick that I
I'll just map
I'll
out
just map out
the presentation before you even
presentation
start
before you
working
even
on it.
start working on it.
What needs to be
What
said
needs to be
when?
said when?
What the
Mhm.
aha
What the
points,
aha
what those
points,
aha
what those aha
moments that like
moments
the
that
want
like
to read
want to read
it.
it like.
It's a dynamic
It's a
way.
dynamic
I
way.
usually just
I
work
usually
with
just work
the
with
paper, lots of
paper,
squares,
lots of squares,
and slides,
and
and say
slides,
this
and
is
say
this is how we
this is
building
how
that
we're
journey.
building that journey.
Right. Right. So it has to be a very, there has to be a method, there has to be a structure to on how you want to approach that, right? It can't just be something, okay, I'm done, I'm ready, I still have time, let me work on these presentation slides and go boom, 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 boom without even that storyboard to work with, right?
Really difficult to create something impactful without thinking about it at the beginning of it. So it's kind of the strategy, story, why people should care and what should I say to them. I
Right.
think it simplifies instead of having those 40 slides saying information it's going to be there. It's just the
Yes.
information that actually needs to be there.
needs to be there.
Yes. But you know what? It's funny because in that's kind of like in communication or when in written works, right? Sometimes being able to effectively summarize something, that in itself is a skill. And sometimes, people either can't be bothered or are not very confident about that again because they feel like, okay, if I cut this down, I might miss out something that is important. But again, if you know how to apply effective presentation design, then you're not going to have that fear because everything is going to be captured in those 5 slides anyway.
Absolutely agree.
Absolutely agree.
It might be scary to see things differently. And the excellence comes from practice.
Absolutely. Agree with you there 100%. Okay, so as we're talking about presentation tools, I want you to tell us what your favorite presentation tool is and why, of course.
Oh my.
All right.
I'll say
like
presentation that I throw. It's like, am I the only designer that
says
openly love PowerPoint? And I'm okay with PowerPoint right now. I hated it. I remember being at my first job, sitting with the creative director and they need to present to the client next morning, and she's asking me, can you just do this PowerPoint? And I'm straight
And I'm
after the
straight after the
ASCO. Let's
ASCO.
face it, I
Let's
have
face it,
no
I
idea
have
how
no
to
idea
use
how
that
to use
program.
that program.
No
Okay.
clue. So
No
I'm
clue. So I'm
crying. I'm like,
crying. I'm
I
like,
want to go
I want to
home.
go
I want to
home. I want
eat.
to
And
eat.
she's
And she's
asking me to do this
asking me to do this
impossible
impossible
task.
task.
So PowerPoint,
PowerPoint,
that's love-hate relationship.
love-hate relationship.
Okay.
But I realized I
But I
cannot
realized I
change
cannot
the whole
change the whole
industry,
industry.
right? It
Right?
keeps
It
coming back,
keeps coming back,
keeps coming back to
Right.
my
keeps coming
different
back to my
jobs. And I
different
saw
jobs. And I saw
that it's really
that it's
important
really
tool to many
important tool
teams
to many
within the
teams
business and
within the
outside of the
business and
business.
outside of the business.
All right,
Okay.
so I changed
All right, so I
myself.
changed myself.
You adapted. You adapted to the market.
I
Yes.
adapted,
I
right?
adapted, right?
But that's great. I mean, that says a lot about you as a designer, as a professional, because then again, I mean, a lot, just because there's so many other tools out there, then there are designers who say, no, I only work with this. But in your case, you were brave enough to embrace and open-minded enough to say, you know what, businesses still work with PowerPoint. And instead of me trying to convince them to work with something else, let me just learn this and, see how I can best work with it and be comfortable with it. So I think, again, that really says a lot about you as a professional.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
a lovely
That's a lovely
compliment. I'll take it as a
compliment. Take it
compliment.
as a compliment.
Of course it is. Of course it is a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole
That's the
idea
whole
about
idea about
us using the
us
tools,
using
not
the
tools
tools,
using.
not tools using.
Yes.
And I agree
And
that a
I
lot
agree
of
that a lot of
great visuals, you're
great visuals,
probably
you're
not going
probably
to be
not going to be
able to
able
use
to
in
use in
PowerPoint
PowerPoint
alone.
alone.
Like someone using the
Someone
full
using the
Creative
full
Suite,
Creative Suite,
Adobe
Adobe
Illustrator,
Illustrator,
Photoshop,
Photoshop,
techniques to
techniques to
happen
happen
to deliver
Right.
high
to deliver
quality
high quality
results.
results.
But the final
But the final
output is a
output is a
PowerPoint that people
PowerPoint
can
that people
actually
can
use.
actually use.
Because I also
Because
had
I also
clients
had
that
clients
previously
that
worked for
previously worked for
designers that
designers
used
that used
Keynote or some other
Node or
programs, but
some other
then they
programs,
cannot
but then they cannot
take slides, see the
take
content,
slides,
they
see the
can't update
content,
any
they can't update
fixes.
any
It's really
fixes.
difficult
It's really
and not
difficult
flexible
and not
asset for them.
flexible asset for them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, but you know what? I think PowerPoint is definitely here to stay. So I'm happy that there are designers like yourself who actually espouse it and say, you know what, this is a good tool. Let's keep working with it instead of just always, working with the next thing that comes out, right? Because again, as I was telling you earlier, at the end of the day, it also has to do with like what you realized. It's what most of the businesses use anyway. That's what most of businesses are comfortable in. So if you meet them there in a space that they're familiar with, then that just makes the collaboration a lot smoother, I think.
That one, exactly. The
Exactly.
collaboration, the
Collaboration,
communication,
the communication,
let's not fight for a
let's
few
not fight
hours
for a
what
few
tool we're going to
hours
use.
what tool we're gonna use.
Let's
Yes.
focus on what
Let's
needs to be
focus on
done.
what needs to be done.
Absolutely. Great. That's such a great final thought. Is there anything else you'd like to invite everyone to visit your website? Final thoughts before we end tonight's broadcast.
Hmm.
Hmm.
First, the big thank you
First, a
for
big
having
thank
me
you for
as your
having
first
me as your
podcast
first
of
podcast of
2023.
2023.
You're welcome.
Of course, yes,
Of course,
everyone,
yes,
come
everyone,
join
come
us
join
on
us on
LinkedIn. Let's
LinkedIn.
connect,
Let's
let's
connect,
chat
let's chat
about
Yes.
how
about
to make
how to make
points
points
super awesome.
super awesome.
And here to
And here
answer
to
any
answer
question.
any question.
Okay, that's wonderful. Yanni, let me see. Okay, yeah. We don't have any questions at the moment. So what we're gonna do is, anyway, this recording is gonna stay on LinkedIn. And if we have if there are questions that come up, then people can just leave their comments and questions there. And of course, your link is directly on this event. So, I highly encourage you to reach out to Yanni and check out her page, check out her profile, and check out her website as well. And again, if you have any questions, then feel free to just drop a comment or a question at the bottom of this broadcast. All right. Okay, so thank you so much and have a very, very good evening.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
as
so much
well.
as
Have a
well.
fantastic
Have a
evening.
fantastic evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.